The necessity of Christopher Marlowe's multiple pseudonymity, including key examples. That Christopher Marlowe survived his alleged death in 1593 and continued writing under pseudonyms, including William Shakespeare, is supported by a convergence of historical, literary, and political and overwhelming autobiographical contextual evidence. Key to this assumption is his use of multiple pseudonyms to ensure survival, adapt to different genres, and evade censorship. Among the multiple pseudonyms attributable to him, 5 of the most compelling are given at the end. 1. Escaping persecution and ensuring survival. Marlowe's, true Shakespeare's, faked death has been a strategic necessity to avoid execution following charges of heresy and political subversion, especially high treason, the Dutch libels. Operating under pseudonyms allowed Marlowe to remain hidden from authorities while continuing his literary career. His association with Reconnaissance, as well as his controversial views on religion and authority, made him a marked man. Writing openly under his real name would have been impossible. 2. Political censorship in Elizabethan England. The Elizabethan regime enforced strict censorship, particularly on works addressing sensitive political or religious issues. Marlowe's bold, subversive voice, evident in plays like Dr. Faustus, Edward II, or Tamburlaine I and II, made him a definite target. Adopting multiple pseudonyms allowed him better to publish without fear of retaliation and to circumvent the scrutiny of the censors. This strategy also aligns with the clandestine nature of his known associates in the spy network. Deptford Reckoning. 3. Camouflage of prolific output. The sheer volume of high-quality works attributed to true Shakespeare and other contemporaneous writers suggests an output that is sheer, inconceivable for a single individual. Writing under multiple pseudonyms allowed Marlowe to diffuse his works across various identities, avoiding suspicion and creating the illusion of a collaborative literary community. 4th, exploration of different styles and genres. Marlowe's literary genius extended across multiple forms: lyric poetry, drama, narrative poetry, satire, allegory, translations, and others. To adapt to the conventions of each genre and to target distinct audiences, multiple pseudonyms have been absolutely necessary. For instance, William Shakespeare for plays and dramatic poetry, blending history, tragedy, and comedy. George Wither or Michael Drayton for lyric and pastoral poetry. Richard Barnfield or Gervase Markham for political and autobiographical details. This stunning diversity allowed him to experiment without being confined to a single literary persona. Evidence of stylistic parallels. Scholars have identified striking similarities in style, themes, and language among works attributed to Shakespeare, Marlowe, and other Elizabethan writers such as Michael Drayton, George Chapman, Richard Barnfield, and others. These stunning overlaps suggest a single creative mind. Pseudonyms offered a convenient way for Marlowe to disguise his role in crafting such works while maintaining literary dominance. 6. Collaboration and the Elizabethan literary scene. The boundaries between individual Elizabethan writers were porous. Marlowe's pseudonyms enabled him to pretend in such collaborations under multiple identities, further masking his prolific authorship. This also explains why some works traditionally attributed to Shakespeare seem to exhibit multiple authorial voices. 7. Psychological and creative necessity. Marlowe's inconceivable creativity has driven him to adopt multiple pseudonyms as a means of exploring different facets of his identity. Writing under distinct names allowed him to experiment with different perspectives, voices, and themes. This fragmentation of identity mirrors his complex personal history, his complementary philosophy and intellectual ambition. 8. The role of political and religious subtext. Marlowe's works contained dangerous political and religious subtext. Pseudonymity enabled him to address these themes while shielding himself from the authorities. For example, plays attributed to Shakespeare often contain subtle critiques of power and monarchy, which clearly reflect Marlowe's intellectual and philosophical preoccupations. 9. Anomalies in the Shakespeare narrative. There is no concrete evidence connecting William Shakespeare of Stratford to the plays and poesy attributed to him. This absence strengthens the argument that someone else, such as Marlowe, was the true author. Several Shakespearean plays reference events and ideas that postdate Marlowe's supposed death. 1593. Having survived, he would have had the time and opportunity to produce these works. The sudden, totally surprising emergence of William Shakespeare as a new literary force coincides with Marlowe's seamless disappearance in 1593, suggesting a deliberate substitution or rebranding. 10. The plausibility of a controlled literary persona. The pseudonym William Shakespeare served as a front for Marlowe's works, with the assistance of a network of supporters. This theory accounts for the lack of direct evidence connecting Shakespeare of Stratford to the plays, as well as the coordinated effort to sustain the Shakespearean narrative. Conclusion. The necessity of Christopher Marlowe's multiple pseudonymity reflects a strategy born of survival, political constraints, and creative ambition. The 5 pseudonyms mentioned here, William Shakespeare, George Wither, Michael Drayton, Thomas Heywood, and Thomas Dekker, illustrate the breadth of his literary genius and his ability to adapt to the demands of different audiences and genres. This hypothesis not only fills the gaps in the traditional Shakespeare narrative, but also redefines the legacy of one of history's greatest literary enigmas. 5 examples for Marlowe's multiple pseudonymities. 1. William Shakespeare. The most prominent and enduring pseudonym, William Shakespeare, emerged immediately after Marlowe's supposed death in 1593. The works attributed to Shakespeare display a seamless continuation of Marlowe's themes, such as power, ambition, and the human condition, as well as a deep familiarity with classical literature, legal concepts, and courtly life. Stylistic parallels in vocabulary, imagery, and thematic depth between Marlowe's earlier works and Shakespearean plays suggest a shared authorial voice. Furthermore, the sudden rise of Shakespeare as a literary figure coincides with Marlowe's disappearance, May 1593, reinforcing the idea of a deliberate substitution. In case of your interest, find this stunning graph, which can be interpreted as a real scientific smoking gun for the Shakespeare authorship riddle, in this YouTube video entitled "There is Only One True Shakespeare." 2. George Wither. George Wither is known for his pastoral poetry, political commentary, and satirical works. His writings reflect a subversive intellectual spirit, resonating with Marlowe's known style and interests. Wither's prolific output and the intellectual depth of his works align with Marlowe's capacity for diverse literary forms. The satirical tone and willingness to challenge authority seen in Wither's works echo Marlowe's rebellious nature. 3. Michael Drayton. Drayton's works, including historical poetry, sonnets, and odes, display a mastery of form and a historical awareness that mirrors Marlowe's breadth of knowledge. His polyolbion reveals an encyclopedic mind capable of synthesizing vast amounts of information, qualities evident in Marlowe's own works. Drayton's stylistic range and thematic concerns, including nationalism, myth-making, and history, align with those found in Marlowe's earlier plays and poetry. 4th, Thomas Heywood. Heywood is credited with a vast body of dramatic works that often explore domestic themes and moral dilemmas, reflecting a versatility that aligns with Marlowe's own dramatic genius. His An Apology for Actors also reveals a deep engagement with the theatrical world, a hallmark of Marlowe's career. The emotional depth and dramatic structure of Hayward's plays suggest an author of Marlowe's caliber. Additionally, the prolific nature of Hayward's output mirrors Marlowe's hypothetical need to distribute his works across various identities. 5. Thomas Dekker. Dekker's prolific output as a playwright and pamphleteer often reflected the vibrancy of urban life and the struggles of common people. His works are notable for their empathy, wit, and engagement with social. While stylistically distinct in some respects, Dekker's works contain thematic and dramatic elements consistent with Marlowe's humanistic perspective. The depth and versatility of Dekker's output suggest a logic connection to Marlowe's creative genius.